Well, good morning and welcome to today's webinar on becoming a thought leader, how to develop, find, and share valuable content. My name is Terry Wheeler and I'm the founder of Professional Services Marketing, and with me today I have my wonderful business partner, Christy Gusick. And Christy is an absolute expert in this area, so you are really in for a treat. And I'm pleased to tell you a little bit about Christy before I turn the floor over to her. Christy, as I mentioned, first and foremost, is my business partner. We've been practicing together in our business for over 3 years. In fact, we're celebrating our anniversary, which is awesome. But Christy has significant experience in the financial services industry and has also worked with a number of our legal industry clients. She's the chair, the committee member chair of the Minnesota Financial Planning Association, and so she chairs the PR committee. I said that wrong, sorry about that. But Christy also has a long history of being a financial services entrepreneur, owned her own business, sold her own business very successfully, and counsels many of our clients both on an individual coaching basis as well as on an outsourced marketing basis for entire firms. She's extremely experienced in sales and new business development. And as you can see, Christy has a degree in human development with a focus on counseling. And Christy, among many other qualities, is just extremely savvy about social media and how to use social media to build and grow your reputation. For those of you who have been on past webinars, this is all about our pillar 3. What are we doing out there to increase our name recognition in the marketplace? So it's with pleasure I turn the floor over to your presenter today, Christy Gusick.
Thanks, Terry. It's always a bright day brightener when Terry does the introduction because she's so nice.
Oh, no,
Thanks,
no.
Terry. Anyways, before we get started, just a new housekeeping note. We are excited to share with you the fact that GoToWebinar has now made it a possibility to download right off of your screens the handouts that we're going to make available for today's presentation. So if you will notice in your control bar, and I've actually put a screenshot there, you will see a section that has handouts. We've uploaded 3 handouts there for you to use as resources from today's webinar. The first one being a PDF copy of the actual PowerPoint presentation. So if you care to download that, it's right there for you. And also I'll be referencing the other 2 documents throughout today's presentation. One is 10 ways to repurpose your content, and then another is blog tip sheet. So please try that. You all are the first ones that get to try this out, and hopefully it works well because we like to keep doing it. So let's move on, jump right in. Are you ready to become a thought leader? We hope so because you're on this webinar. Let's talk about what we're going to cover today. So the very first thing we're going to cover is laying the groundwork, what you need to do, what you need to think about before you actually launch the plan for becoming a thought leader in your area of expertise. We'll go through that real quick. Then we'll talk about creating your own content, give you some ideas and tips on that. And then lastly, we will share with you how to curate content and what that means and how to do that. And then of course we will finish up with questions. Okay, laying the groundwork. Why is it important to become a thought leader? Well, it's important to become a thought leader for a lot of reasons, but I'm going to tell you exactly why based on some research that we've been using in a lot of our presentations this spring. And that is some research done by a marketing firm called Hinge Marketing. And I love their research because it's all about how people buy professional services. And in particular, they do research around people that buy legal services and financial services, just like the majority of our clients. So the very first type of referrals, because again, based on, I'm sure if you've been on any of our past webinars or read any of our past materials or lived personally, the fact that the majority of your new business probably does come from referrals, anywhere from 80 to 90%, but the majority of those referrals are actually coming to you based on the fact that you are an expert in your field. So these 3 types of referrals are the types that you're getting, but the majority of your referrals are coming to you because people see you as a thought leader in your niche. So The second type is reputation, meaning they've heard from people in your network that you're good at what you do. And the third type of referral, surprisingly, is from your clients. So it's called experience-based, but essentially what that means is it's people that have actually experienced you as their professional. So we are going to talk about how to build your expertise in today's presentation, and more specifically, how to create content around your expertise. So just to tell you a little bit more about that expertise and how people see you as an expert, 30% of people that see you as an expert in your area have actually heard you speak. So that in and of itself is a separate topic that we will probably talk about in a future webinar at some point in time. But speaking on your area of expertise is 30% of the reason why you're getting those type of referrals. 20% is they've read a blog post or an article that you have written, and then 17% is they've interacted with you on social media. So we are going to be talking about that 37% that have either read you on a blog post and or interacted with you on social media. So this is great information, and we hope that you take this to heart, because this is how you build a solid referral-based practice. Okay, so first of all, we would like to talk to you about your messaging. Before you do any kind of content creation or content curation, you need to know your message. In other words, what's different and unique about your firm, your practice, and what you bring to the marketplace. You can't just go out there saying, I'm a wonderful family law attorney. Well, we need to know specifically what's unique and different about your family law practice and your personality. And we've done lots of presentations on how to develop your brand and your personal brand message and things like that. So before you do any of this, if you haven't done that work, you need to go back to the basics. Secondly, you need to know your target audience. Now, I was going to try and put an example of something that I think really shows a good way to not know your audiences, if that makes sense. If you've been watching TV at all this summer, you may have seen an American Family insurance commercial. And it's got the music, and it shows people in various stages of their life, and it shows like a younger family and the kids, and then it shows like a middle-aged family doing their thing, and then the last family they show is this couple. They both have gray hair, long flowing gray hair, and they're in this white flowing tent out in the middle of some desert, and there's a frog on the bedstand, and they wake up to the frog croaking, and they take it outside, and they're in some savanna. And to me, that is a really good example of American Family Insurance not knowing their target audience, because when I think of American Family Insurance, I don't think of people with long flowing gray hair living in some tent over in Africa. That's what we don't want you to do. We want you to know who your audience is specifically. That means their age, what kind of car they drive, what kind of restaurants they like to go to, what their priorities are. I mean, you really need to do some work on your target audience, because your content needs to appeal to them, not to the general public. It needs to appeal to your target audience. The further you get in your business and the better you get at your business, the more specific that target audience will be. So if you're newer in business and newer in your practice, yeah, your target audience might be a little broader, but just every year, make sure you jump on our webinar in December and go through your marketing planning process, because that will get refined. Your messaging will get refined. Your target audience will get refined more and more every year. So always pay attention to that. And thirdly, if you're going to create content or curate content, you must put some time and effort into thinking about your audience's perspective. So what are their concerns and what are their frequently asked questions? And we'll get into that here in just a moment. So let's first of all talk about creating content. How do you create great content? So, like I was just saying, the very first thing on your checklist is thinking about what are your clients' biggest concerns. So when we do websites for our clients, we actually ask them to really brainstorm 25, if they can, frequently asked questions that their clients have when they come in the door, whether they come in as a prospect or a new client. There's all these questions that they have and things. one of our consultants said to me the other day that you need to think about what are some of the questions that your clients are even too polite to ask you? Because how great is it if they're too embarrassed or too polite to ask you a question, but then you write an article on it, or you have a blog post on it, or a frequently asked question. I mean, that's where you're really hitting the ball out of the park. So spend some time, bring somebody in if you're not good at brainstorming around this, but really spend some time thinking about those concerns and those questions that your clients have. Don't just ramble on about some technical thing that nobody cares about. That's not going to help you. Next, translate your expertise. So in one of the tip pages that we put together for this presentation, one of the tips that we give is actually write like you're speaking to an 8th grader. And I think that's a wonderful tip because nobody cares about the technical side of your business. You wouldn't be hired if people cared about that, because they would actually then become a do-it-yourselfer and do their own thing, to be honest with you. So what you need to do is you need to be able to translate your expertise to your client's level. Sprinkle in enough content that expertise, they know that you know what you're talking about, but really you need to make them feel good about the fact that you're educating them and not trying to overwhelm them. So that brings me to the next point, which is educating your audience. So the big thing is you want people to feel empowered. You want them to feel like they can approach you with a question, even though maybe they feel like it's a dumb question. Remember that things that your clients are too polite to ask you. You don't want them to feel like their question's too dumb to take up your time, because then they're not going to feel comfortable coming to you with their next concern or their next problem. So educate, not sell. And I know we all should know that by now, but I just want to remind you, as you're embarking on this whole endeavor of hopefully becoming more of a thought leader, that you just remind yourself that you're translating and educating. That's really, really important as you start creating your own content. So consider blogging. And the reason why I put consider blogging is because blogging isn't necessarily for everyone. We love to have you blog if it's the right time in your marketing plan, but marketing plans are put together for a reason, because sometimes other marketing initiatives need to take a priority, or maybe you don't have enough people at your practice to help blog, or maybe you don't have enough time and other things are taking a priority. I think blogging should be in your plan somewhere, but again, don't feel like you're behind the times if you're not blogging. The biggest thing is that you're creating your own content and sharing it in some way, shape, or form. And even bigger than that is that you're creating content that actually matters to people and that they're considering valuable. So in terms of blogging, I did put a tip sheet in your handout, so hopefully you are able to access that tip sheet, because it does talk to you about how to blog. So some things I just really high level want to talk about in terms of blogging are the fact that a good blog is only 400 to 600 words. So don't feel like you need to create this big long article. In today's media savvy society, people don't want to read a long blog or even a long article for your newsletter. Keep it short, 400 to 600 words. And again, talk like you are speaking to and educating an 8th grader. Keep it really simple. And also remember to address your client's concerns. So there's other tips in there, and please feel free to download that. If you have trouble downloading it, there'll be an opportunity for you when you exit our webinar today to complete a survey and request any missing information. So next, let's talk about curating content and what that means. Okay, curating content. Curating content is the process of collecting, displaying information that is relevant to your area of expertise. So essentially, curating means that you go out and discover some content that is valuable, that is around your area of expertise. So what I do is I actually log in to Google, and remember that list of your clients' concerns that you've created earlier that we talked about as part of your foundation. I take one of those questions and I actually type it right into Google, and then I look and see what sources come up that answer that question. And if it's a reputable source and somebody that is not in conflict with me or not a competitor, then I dig deeper into that and I look and see what other kind of content they've been producing. And if it's a great source, then I will bookmark that source or put it into a bookmark file on my browser, or I will subscribe to their RSS feed. Anything I can do to keep track of that content or that source of content for me to actually curate. Again, curating is collecting content that you think is valuable, organizing it, and then sharing it with your audience. So the bullets here say discover, so you go out and research those content sources. You review them to make sure that they have good educational content that supports your area of expertise or supports or validates the things that you're telling your clients on a regular basis. And then you curate it, meaning you share it with others. Like, hey, this is a great article on how to talk to your children about divorce, or this is an excellent article that tells you on how to save on taxes. Whatever it is that's your area of expertise, you want to make sure that you tell your audience why that you think it's a good article, and that is the process of curating. So in terms of, again, curating content and going through that process of finding good sources, you really want to do some work on finding experts that address your clients' frequently asked questions. So in other words, Hinge Marketing is a firm that Terry and I look at a lot for excellent marketing information. And you saw that research information that we showed earlier in today's webinar. I actually go to them quite a bit for content because they have excellent content that is content or information that we enjoy researching or looking into ourselves. And of course we want our audience to know, because this is the time of educating your clients and your prospects. Okay, so once you've done that, once you've got your sources and you've picked out some ideas that you want to share with people, the best thing to do before you actually start sharing it is to create an editorial calendar. So this is an example on the screen here of an editorial calendar that we created back in November of 2013. So what we like to do is we actually like to organize our content by month, and we actually share more content. Our editorial calendar now would probably be a little more robust, but I thought I'd just start simple and show you what it looked like back a few years ago. So what we would do is Terry and I would have our sources. Terry's sources tend to lean more on the legal side, mine tend to lean more on the financial services side, but we know our audience values both perspectives and information from all those sources. So we take that information and we put it into a calendar format and then put our call outs, whether it's our content that we're calling attention to or curated content that we've gone out and found. We put a call out there which draws our audience's attention to that content and kind of says why they should actually pay attention to it. And then in the editorial calendar, we also put a link to that content. And the reason why we do this is because, one, we can kind of review it before we share it. Two, we can ensure that we're not double sharing, if you will. We learn the hard way not to share the same content on the same day. Actually, I did that for a long time. I was in charge of the social media calendar when we first started together, and I was blasting our contacts with the same content each day. So if Terry and I had shared contacts, they were getting the same article from me, the same article from Terry, and probably the same article from our Facebook page and our LinkedIn company page. So someone was kind enough to say, hey, you guys might want to back off on that, or do it on a different day. So you'll see on this page, we learned our lesson by the time we did this editorial calendar, and we were still using the same content, but we were just sharing it on different days. The other thing that we've found now is we actually share more than what this calendar shows. But again, for simplicity's sake, we wanted to show you this example. So what's good, another reason why an editorial calendar is helpful is because you can create this editorial calendar. You can even have a marketing assistant. You can have a marketing firm like ours create it. You can create it, and then you can review it, and somebody else can implement it for you. So when your practice gets to the point that you have consultants or you have people working for you that can help you with this, you don't have to lift that burden yourself. So this is just an excellent tool, and this I think is honestly just a Microsoft Word calendar that we pulled up and used. So okay, the next thing you need to know about is the magic formula of what type of content to share. So this is the formula that the industry really adheres to. We try to adhere to this as well. And if you want to come across as an educator and not salesy online in terms of your content, you really want to stick to this formula. And it can vary a little, 30, 70, but really right around the 20% of your own content that you're calling attention to, either that's on your website, in a newsletter or a blog, or maybe you spoke somewhere, you were featured in the Wall Street Journal, whatever it is, keep it to 20%. 80% should be content that you found from other industry experts that you are sharing with your network. And I would even sprinkle in that 80%. I'd even sprinkle in just some fun things too. Maybe just a comment on, you know, your perspective on the market, or even fun things about, you know, hey, we did this client event or this volunteer opportunity. Here's a picture of us there. Here's a picture of our new office. Just things of interest. Terry and I have put pictures in there of ourselves giving the webinars because it's fun. Gives people a peek behind the curtain. Okay, now this is a big one, and notice we've got a tip sheet on this that you can download as well, but repurpose. You don't want to go through all the effort of actually creating your own content without actually being able to repurpose. So our goal for our clients isn't to just have them creating content, because that's exhausting, and it's really hard to be strategic when you're just churning content out, unless you're doing that for a living actually. So what we recommend, and what we actually do in our own practice, because really truthfully Terry and I do try to practice what we preach 100% of the time, but Terry and I spend time in November, sometime it sneaks into December, brainstorming our top 6 really main topics for the year that we want to develop content around. And those 6 topics can change as the year goes, and often do, but we really try to lay that out at the beginning of the year and say, these are the 6 webinar topics, that's what we start, that we want to speak on this year. And so Terry and I divide those up. She does 3, I do 3. And not only do we create presentations around those topics, but then we blog on them. Sometimes I'm a slacker on that. Terry's better than I am, but we write articles, and Terry, in fact, has been a rock star in the area of getting her articles published all over the place. She's famous, actually.
Stop it.
And so that's why I put these on here, because this is actually what we do with our content. I put a picture of somebody speaking. So I've actually been doing a lot of speaking lately, and although I can't honestly say that all the content that I've been speaking on has been one of those magic 6 items for them, you know, it's really easy if we've already got this content created to say, hey, I could speak on this. And so we have organized all our topics from the last few years that we've spoken on or done webinars on into a presentation sheet. So we have everything in one document. If somebody says, hey, Christy, would you speak at my event? In fact, I just spoke at an event recently for FPA, and somebody reached out to me, I think yesterday, and said, hey, my associate was there and saw you speak. Would you want to speak at this event coming up in September? And I said, sure, I'd love to. So that works great, speaking on those topics. Of course, the blogging. So if you do an article, you know, you blog it, but then like Terry does, she's fabulous at writing then longer articles for magazines, and a blog would be shorter, but she takes those blog posts or the webinars and actually expands on it, which is easy to do, and then gets that PR around it. So I put the PR in there. And then lastly, We also really repurpose our webinar content into client training. Now, we don't just take and jam it into a client training without customizing it, but we definitely take that thought leadership and use it as a basis for customizing content for our clients. And it's just a really fabulous way to do business because it makes your life a lot easier if you do the legwork ahead of time and the strategy to put together a good content plan. All right. So what I wanted to show you, because the last thing that I actually am not going to speak on today is then how do you share that content online? And I normally, Terry and I recommend Hootsuite to organize your content curation. That's worked really well for us, but I know some of you have different programs that your firms require you to use. Whatever it is, definitely look at that as a next step. I didn't really want to go into that real deeply today because for two reasons. One, I want you to first spend the time laying out the groundwork and putting together a strategy and putting a lot of thought into your message and your audience before you start worrying about sharing it. So don't put the cart before the horse. And secondly, I want to call your attention to what's on the screen here, which is the fact that we have put together a webinar that we already gave last October that will go into that, how to actually build your reputation online using social media. You can view any of these past webinars that are on the page here via our website, and we put an arrow up there. You'll see the navigation bar, free webinars, and if you go down, click on that, it says archived webinars. So all of our webinars, like today's, are saved online for you to watch on our YouTube channel. And so what I would say to you is once you've done the steps that I've outlined in today's webinar and you've actually, done your strategy, you've started writing your own content, you're starting to curate content, watch this webinar and it will walk you through some additional ideas on how to curate it. Terry has a comment.
I just want to comment. This is a good time to say that we have one of our clients who is a family law attorney in New Jersey, and he did a webinar on divorcing a narcissist. And it was just one of his regular webinars that we had encouraged him to start doing. And when you go to his YouTube channel, over 20,000 people have viewed that webinar, which is amazing. So it's not just about getting people to come to your webinar live. It's also being able to archive your content in this way, put it on your website, create a YouTube channel, and continue to build a following. How else could you ever get in front of 20,000 people with one 45-minute initiative that you had in front of your computer that you recorded? So I just wanted to underscore that because I thought that was really relevant, because it does make a difference. It's not like your archive just sits there, and it really, if you promote it and use your social media posts to promote the webinars or the content that you've done in the past, it really lives on and on.
Excellent point, Terry. And that brings me to the point about our webinar. We have, when we do our webinars, we have anywhere from 30 to 100 people on them. And we're really proud of that fact because it's taken some work to put these together, and it's just a really fun way for us to share expertise. But like Terry said, when we, on our YouTube channels, we'll get hundreds and hundreds of people rewatching these, and we can quickly refer somebody to our webinars. So this is just another great way to expand your expertise and educate people. Okay, so next steps. Let's finish up here with what you can do to take away from this webinar and actually put this into action. So first, let's just review. Lay the groundwork for your content before you dive in. Make sure you really work on your messaging. If you need help with that, call us, call a coworker, call a friend, whatever. Work on that. Next, begin creating your content and use our tip sheets. Do the frequently asked questions, look at your client's concerns, start creating your own content. And then third, start curating content. Again, the 20-80. So 20% your own content, 80% curating content. Okay, and then next, what we want you to do is today, identify your audience. So that means walk away from today's presentation, look at your audience, really pay attention to who is your target market. Who is that 8th grader? What does that 8th grader look like? And a lot of times what we encourage our clients to do is actually take a picture of somebody. It doesn't have to be a real client, but pull a picture off the internet and actually put a picture up in your office of what your client looks like, what your target market looks like, just to remind you not to get off, not to color outside the lines on that, just to look at, I focus on middle-aged retirees who drive Buicks, or, put that picture in your office so you don't try to get off and educate somebody that's way outside that target audience. Okay, we already talked about this. Leverage your expertise to create content, and then curate content is the last one. So, and then finally, create that editorial calendar, which there are a lot of examples online on how to do that. So if you need help with that, certainly look up online, or again, feel free to reach out to us. And then, of course, repurpose, extremely important. So with that being said, we've kind of come to the end here of our presentation, and we often get about 5, sometimes 10 minutes of questions. So we like to leave time for that. So I think we do have a question. We have one question here.
We have a question from Brian, and the question is, does 400 to 600 word blogs work for SEO on websites if you're trying to get new business that way also? So maybe you can talk about the length of a blog post. I mean, in our experience, a 400 to 600 word blog does work very, very well. And when you do blog posts, you have the opportunity within the blog posting technology to search engine optimize those blog posts. So you want to make sure that you're fully leveraging the technical opportunities that you have to make sure that you're getting those blog posts out there. But then, of course, you put them on your social media calendar. And if you write a blog post, there's no reason that you can't post it 3 or 4 times on social media over the course of a month, and just, reword your call to action, or your, gee, I thought you might find this interesting, or we've gotten a lot of questions from clients on this, and you can repost those blog posts. You can also set up your blog posts so that people can automatically subscribe to your blog post. So you're also building a following in that way too, so that every time you do a blog post, your fans and followers will all automatically receive that blog post, usually in their email. What do you think, Christy?
So the only thing I would add to that, because I think Terry's answer is awesome, but Brian, I know your business, and I think I know what you're trying to do. And he has a B2C strategy. So Brian is a business directly to consumer, which I know some of you are as well. And a couple things have just changed with Google in the last 2 weeks. And the only reason I know this, I'm not an SEO expert myself, is because one of my colleagues that I work closely with is, and she was sharing with me that in order to get high SEO rankings on your blog, previously you would see in people's blogs, they'd have links to other blogs throughout their posts. Now, that used to be a strategy up until 2 weeks ago that Google really wanted you to have. But Courtney was actually sharing with me that, because she's a blogging SEO expert, that's changed. And so you don't have to do that anymore. So what I would encourage you to do, Brian, and anybody else, is I would encourage you to just follow your strategy with the educating and the thought leadership around your potential target's concerns, and get it out there. Then I would say work with, maybe Brian, you're probably wanting to really maximize your SEO opportunities. I would work with an SEO strategist, even if it's just, a small amount, and I would try to maximize the words after you've written the blog. So don't worry about it when you're writing the blog, otherwise it'll hold up the creative process, if you will. And then the other thing I would do is I would look at places that you can repurpose or share your blogs with other similar thought leaders. So people like a mortgage broker, maybe because Brian is actually a residential real estate professional. I'd look at somebody that's in a similar area that you can maybe say, hey, if I share my blog with you, can you share a blog post with me? And then you're still having excellent content that's related and something your target market will enjoy reading, but you're also getting more leverage for your blog as well.
One final thought on that too, if I can. Another way to determine what to blog on is by having access to the Google Analytics that you hopefully all have embedded in your websites. Because when you look at the keywords and the phrases that people searched on to find you, many times you can find blog posting ideas by trying to be responsive to what people are trying to find you under, if that makes sense. So you look at your analytics and you say, gosh, I'm seeing that people are looking for this specific topic, and it's not necessarily on my website, but I'm going to blog about it. So that's just another thought on that. We have another question. This is a great question, and we get this all the time. How often should you blog?
So I think it depends on you and your business and your time frame, to be honest with you. If your bandwidth only allows you to blog once a month, but repurpose that blog, repurpose that content as much as you can. I think where people really get caught up in things is they think they need to blog every week or they need to blog all the time, but they're not maximizing that blog and they're not actually repurposing that content. They're not doing what I just suggested to Brian, which is getting that blog content on other people's pages, and they're not even blogging on relevant topics. Then it doesn't matter how much you blog if you're not doing a good job with it. So I think both Terry and I would recommend that you really look at your personal bandwidth, your priorities in marketing, and pay attention to that instead of just launching and trying to cram out a bunch of content. Everybody's situation, everybody's business, and everybody's strengths are going to be different. So I think it's really a personal thing. So there's really no should answer to that, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Here's another good question. How useful is it to include a photo or a graphic with a blog post? And what sources do you recommend for attaining them? I would say my experience on this one is that it's always nice to include a photo, because when you do post it, that photo will travel with your post. So it will just be more visually appealing as opposed to seeing a little blurb with just a link. So we always encourage our clients, and we ourselves try to always have at least one graphic with the blog post. In terms of how you acquire them, there are many different ways. You can have, if you have a subscription to an iStock or Getty Images, you want to be very careful about not using photographs that you don't have the licensing rights or the permission to use. But if you go online and you start looking at, you do a Google image search for something that you think will convey what you're blogging about, if it isn't a protected picture, there's no reason not to use that in your blog post if it isn't copyrighted, trademarked, etc. Okay, so another question. This is a good question. The question is, how can one convince new clients to spend time on content marketing leadership?
We get this question all the time when we have new clients. I would say the best way is to really talk to them, and this is what we do, and I'll let Terry answer this too, but first of all, I don't ever want to have to convince somebody to do something. I would rather educate them on it and let them make the decision. When you go, and granted, Terry and I were just talking about this earlier today about ideal clients, and I feel like any ideal client that we would have, or hopefully any of you would have, would be somebody that would actually value your expertise and listen to you. And so our clients, I feel, all do that. So I don't want to have to convince somebody of something, but what we do try to do is educate them on why, or how I should say, that their clients are making buying decisions. And we did that earlier today in the webinar and kind of showed some statistics around that. And I feel like if somebody really wants to grow their business and they hear those kind of statistics, that 80 to 90% of their business is going to come from referrals, and the majority of those referrals are coming to them because they see you, or coming to you because they see you as an expert, then you've got to get your expertise out there. To me, it's just common sense. So for the person that asked that question, if you have further frustrations around that issue, it'd probably be interesting to talk to you one-on-one about your particular situation to see if there's something we could further elaborate on to help you with that. So feel free to message us after if you'd like.
Or Christy has this really cool thing on her biography now that we are just implementing, and it's the ability for people to go to Christy's biography on our PSM website and literally click and say schedule a meeting.
Yeah.
And if you just have a quick question, you click and you see what works for your calendar and you submit it, and then you've got a call scheduled with Christy.
Oh, that's a good point. I probably should have put it on the webinar. So for the person that asked that question, feel free to go to my bio, and right next to the right of my picture, you'll see schedule a meeting with Christy, and you can schedule a 15-minute quick question call with me if you want to talk further about that. I'd be happy to talk.
Good. Now, one final question, and the question is regarding repurposing content, and this is from Sue. How much rewriting needs to be done to a blog post before you post it on LinkedIn or elsewhere? And then also, what is the relationship between blog posts and e-newsletters? So I'm going to start and address that one. We have a situation, in fact, we're dealing with this right now with the client, and here's what's interesting. The client does what he considers to be a blog post, but his method of promoting that blog post is to put it out on MailChimp. So he has 250, 300, 400 people who have said, yes, I want to receive your quote unquote blog, but in effect, it's an e-newsletter. And we're in the process right now of saying, this is actually a blog post that you're doing. And instead of having you create this newsletter, quote unquote, article, put it on MailChimp, send it out to everyone, let's move that blog post onto your website and make sure that all of the people, that we register all of the people who are currently signed up to receive it, but then that we also create the functionality for people to be able to say, hey, I want to receive your blog posts when you post them. So that's one thought between the difference between blogs and e-newsletters. I think e-newsletters take a lot more time, and if you have blog posting capabilities through your website, it simply makes it easier for you to create those blog posts. And then also in terms of the repurposing of content, as Christy mentioned, you know, if we take a webinar that we've done and we turn it into a client presentation, well, of course, we're repurposing the content and including examples that are specific to our various different clients. I don't think, you know, it's about knowing your audience. That's the most important thing. So when you repurpose content, if you're repurposing it from a very, very general, broad population of all of your contacts on LinkedIn or out there on social media, and you're repurposing it for a publication that reaches manufacturers in the XYZ industry, well, then you know that you need to tweak and refine it so that it's going to be more relevant, because content and thought leadership is always about, as Christy was saying, sharing relevant content to people who want to know what you do. So to me, that's kind of a common sense thing. When you think about, okay, I'm repurposing it for this group, well, then you just get into their heads a little bit and you start thinking about, as Christy was talking about earlier, what are their needs and concerns? And maybe I can add a sentence here or put an extra few words up in the introduction that's going to make them feel that you created that content just for them.
Yep. Good. Well, I think that's it for today's presentation. So we thank you again for attending, and we invite you to go to our website and look for our next webinar, which is scheduled for August, and Terry is presenting that.
So, and it's going to be, this is going to be one of those webinars where we talk about a series of marketing best practices, and so it's going to be a plethora of ideas for you. It's one of those roll up your sleeves, and hopefully everyone's going to be able to take 3 or 4 or 5 ideas that they can implement right away in their marketing plan. So it's, let's breathe some fresh life into your marketing plan in the heat, the dog days of summer.
Excellent. So we look forward to it. But thank you again for attending, and have a great day.
Yep. Thanks again.